Hello, I am Peter, and I will be guiding you through this module on different mathematical tools regularly used in financial analysis. The standard deviation is extremely important as it measures the dispersion of a data distribution. We have already seen a bit about the theoretical part in the provided material. In this video, I want to focus on the steps necessary to calculate this important measure for the returns of an investment, such as a stock traded on the stock exchange. As the class continues, we will also learn how to calculate this measure for an investment portfolio composed of different assets. We will work step by step. Let's get started. All right, we will begin diving into the world of finance with a fun and practical lesson. Calculating the standard deviation of a stock using a series of 12 historical returns. Don't worry if this sounds complicated. We will break it down step by step, and you'll see it's not as difficult as it seems. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to impress your friends and maybe even a future employer with your new skills. All right, let's start with a little story. Imagine you've invested in a company called Tech Innovators. Over the last year, the stock's monthly returns have been recorded. Here's a quick look at those returns. January, 2.1%. February, minus 1.5%, and so on. These are the monthly returns for Tech Innovators over the past year. Our goal is to calculate the standard deviation of these returns, which will give us a measure of the stock's volatility. In other words, it tells us how much the returns deviate from the average return. First, let's calculate the average return. This is simply the sum of all the returns divided by the number of returns. So, we add up all the returns, 2.1 minus 1.5, and so on. This gives us a total of 9.1. Now we divide this total by 12, since there are 12 returns. The average return is 0.758%. Now that we have the average return, the next step is to calculate the variance. Variance measures how much each return differs from the average return. To do this, we subtract the average return from the observed return individually for each month. We square these deviations. Then we calculate the average of those squared differences. Let's break it down. 2.1 minus 0.758% squared added to minus 1.5 minus 0.758% squared, and so on. What we are doing is subtracting each of the 12 returns observed during the year from the average return to see how far each return is from the mean. Each of these deviations is then squared. In fact, if you forget to square them, this mistake won't get you far. By summing all the deviations without squaring them, the result will always be 0. If you like, try it, and you can confirm this interesting fact. Then we sum each of the squared deviations. In the third line below the variance formula, we sum the values 1.799 plus 5.094 plus 5.960 and so on. Summing all of this, we get 37.758. Now we divide this sum by 12, since there are 12 returns. The variance is 3.146%. Finally, to get the standard deviation, we take the square root of the variance. So, the standard deviation is the square root of 3.146, which is 1.774%. And there you have it. The standard deviation of the monthly returns for Tech Innovators, Inc. is 1.774%. This tells us that, on average, the monthly returns deviate from the average return by approximately 1.774%. You can perform these same calculations step by step using Excel. As you can see in column E, you have the deviations for each month from the mean already squared. As we've already learned, the average of these squared differences in cell E15 is what we know as variance. Cell E16 then shows the square root of the variance, which is the standard deviation. If you look at cells E18 and E19, you will notice the same variance and standard deviation values, but in this case, they were calculated using Excel commands directly. You can use these commands: var.p and dev.p, and Excel will handle all the intermediate calculations for you. Let's review the steps needed to calculate the standard deviation. First, we calculate the average return, which is simply the arithmetic mean of the observed returns during the period covered by the analyzed data. Second step, we calculate the deviation or difference of each month's return compared to the average return. For example, if we take January, which had a return of 2.1%, the deviation from the average return is 1.34%. In this case, the deviation is positive, meaning that January's return was higher than the average. The third step is to square the calculated deviation. We need to do this for all the periods covered by the data. Finally, we calculate the average of all the squared deviations. The value obtained is the variance, and its square root is the standard deviation. Of course, we can use Excel commands to calculate the average return, variance, or standard deviation in a single step. Remember, practice makes perfect. The more you work with these calculations, the easier they will become. Keep up the good work, and soon you'll be experts in analyzing stock returns. See you later.